I bring you warm greetings from the leaders and the more than 1.7 million members of the American Federation of Teachers. We proudly represent and fight for the rights of pre-K through tertiary educators, school support staff, and government employees across the United States. I am truly humbled to be here on the occasion of your 9th National Congress. I feel honored to stand before so many teachers who are the builders of this young democracy. We are truly inspired by your dedication and commitment, your passion and compassion, and above all, your daily sacrifices in building a prosperous nation. I come to you today as an American, but an American whose roots are in the Caribbean. The music, the culture, the poetry, and literature of the African diaspora. I feel my roots in your rhythm, in your singing. My Haitian mom and my dad with roots in the Dominican Republic helped fire a spirit in me that has always wanted to see justice done, to be accepting of those with differences, and to reject prejudice based on color, religion, or gender. They knew that we cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. When I immigrated to the US at the age of 17, I knew that the world was an imperfect place. I had seen injustice, I had seen poverty, but I also knew, even then, that by standing for what is right and pushing ever forward, I could do my part to make a difference in people's lives. That is why, when a white teacher once told me to my face that she gave me a lesser mark because of my color, I became more determined than ever to succeed in my academic career. And that is also why, when I was once politely refused entrance to a dance club, I was young, because I didn't have a special identification card, I promised myself to fight against racism, even when it sometimes comes cloaked in subtlety. By the way, that special identification card was something they only asked of me. My white friends didn't have to show that ID. I was the only one. Sounds a bit like a passbook to me, doesn't it? As I went from high school to university to graduate studies, I found myself wanting to reconnect with my Caribbean roots and culture. And that is what brought me to my interest in Cuba and Cuban society. My graduate school work focused on the Cuban writer, novelist, and ethnographer Miguel Barnet, well known for his expertise in Afro-Cuban culture. And each time that I visited Cuba, I came away wondering, here is a country that's not very economically strong and rich, but still manages to prioritize reducing social inequality, that makes healthcare available to all, and puts access to quality education at the center of society. If they can do this, why can't we? I ask you, why can't we? I am a proud product of public education. And like you, the bedrock of my career is as a classroom teacher. Learners in both our countries deserve quality teaching by quality teachers. Unfortunately, rather than provide access to quality education, the so-called education reformers in both our countries are enacting policies that promote the expansion of corporate non-government private schools and the digitalizing of curriculum designed to replace teachers with computers and robots, all with a profit margin. It should be no surprise that the Trump administration in the United States is working to destabilize and privatize public education and calling it school choice. The truth is, school choice has been used to continue school segregation after our Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional in 1954. Our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, said, "Education is the single most important civil rights issue that we face today." And she was right. And I would add that education is the great equalizer. People like Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and the World Bank are pushing market-based education choices like corporate schools, where profit, not the well-being of our children, is the bottom line. As we all know, corporate schools often create a system where there are winners, those who have access to education, and losers, those who are denied access to education, especially girls. And politicians like Trump continue to push profit-driven reform in a way that is inflicting harm primarily on our Black and brown communities. Despite the agenda of politicians, most Americans, regardless of race, want to see a greater investment in traditional neighborhood public schools. The largest technology companies have now turned their sights on public education as the next big business opportunity. Amazing advances in digital technologies, artificial intelligence, e-tablets, and robotics are quickly becoming the focus of global businesses that see an opportunity to make public education a commodity. A $4.5 trillion, not rand, source of public monies, a so-called commodity that parents and communities are forced to buy to further enrich blood-sucking corporations. As you know from your experience here in South Africa, forcing parents to pay for digital-based education will keep some children permanently locked out of the opportunity that comes with education. There is no stopping the digital revolution, and we should not want to stop it. This revolution promises to improve healthcare, enhance education, and boost efficiency in so many areas. But we must talk about what we need to do to ensure that all children can have access to a high-quality public education. We want to thank the comrades of SADTU for standing with the AFT several years ago as we joined with teacher unions from Uganda, Liberia, and Kenya in a protest against Bridge International Academies at the World Bank and delivered a petition outlining Bridge's troubling track record. Bridge exploits families. Parents spend more than half their incomes on fees. Bridge's curriculum doesn't meet minimum standards. Bridge teachers are poorly paid and treated like robots. And Bridge schools are a laboratory for a marketed vision of higher education that its investors want to spread around the world. Bridge is a bridge to nowhere. Our goal is not to hinder technology and advances. Our role as educators and trade unionists is to fight for real education opportunities for students and to guarantee a real voice for teachers and school staff. We know that the foundation of student success is a trusting relationship among students, teachers, and their school support staff. While technology can enhance the education process, it cannot replace the many important one-on-one relationships with educators that students need to advance in school and in life. An underqualified instructor armed only with an iPad with sophisticated artificial intelligence is not a substitute for a qualified teacher who can connect and engage with learners. Technology can never replace human creativity and judgment. And let me take a moment here to thank my SADTU comrades for your enduring solidarity in the field of human rights. You have stood beside the AFT as we have protested against human rights abuses by the Trump administration against the most vulnerable children and families desperate to seek asylum from violence and economic desperation. It is to my country's everlasting shame that we are caging migrant children in windowless warehouses, leaving them to sleep on concrete floors in soiled clothes. Let me remind you, how you treat children speak to your country's character and values. By Trump's weaponizing inhumane detentions and deportations, by increasing military troops at the border of Mexico, and by shedding the dignity and kindness that we have traditionally shown refugees, these are actions that violate international law and treat and tear at our sense of humanity. Donald Trump is just one part of a worldwide march to the right. Right-wing populists and their privatizing, profit-oriented allies have taken power or threatened to in Poland, Hungary, France, Britain, Italy, Brazil, and of course, the United States. Because democracy is indeed hard work, there is never a perfect beginning, and the struggle always continues. For the US, our founding document, which promised equal protection, failed to extend that protection to women, Native Americans, slaves, indentured workers, everyone except white men who owned land and capital. As momentous as the dawning of South Africa's democracy has been for the world, we all know that the hard work has just begun to ensure that opportunity is extended to all and that the guarantees of the Bill of Rights reach every citizen. Our experience in both our countries tells us that the idea of democracy requires a lot from those who participate in it. It requires people to listen to those with different views, to accept people who look different, and to accept the equality of all, regardless of background. And let us talk frankly today about gender discrimination. Despite progress, gender discrimination is still deeply embedded in our social structures and labor markets. Sexual harassment remains a significant problem for women, one that impacts academic success and professional development. We must fight all forms of gender violence inside and outside of our schools and colleges. And we must highlight men's responsibility to participate in this struggle. We must express alarm at the persistence of the gender pay gap, and we say again that equal pay is a fundamental human right enshrined in international human rights standards of the ILO and United Nations. We must remove all barriers to full participation of women, from the workplace to our own union leadership. And I must remind us all that we have to include these issues in our collective bargaining if we expect to effectively advocate for diversity. I stand before you today as a product of growing up under the influence and intelligence of three strong women: my maternal grandmother, my mother, and my aunt. May they rest in peace. Join me in building a new coalition for international gender justice. And that allows me to return to where we began today, in praise of teachers. A robust system of public education is an essential component of democracy and therefore crucial for democracy's survival. Democracy cannot protect itself. If the next generation is to defend democratic institutions, who better to teach them than the educators of this great union gathered here today? So how do we fight forward, all of us, in both the US and South Africa? First, by making our voice heard at the voting booth, where we must soundly reject the appeals of racism and bigotry that have been adopted by elected officials and public figures who have embraced far-right populism. Racism and bigotry are poisonous to the democratic spirit that has inspired the best traditions of both our unions. Next, we must show up in our workplaces to promote acceptance and solidarity in our schools and colleges. We must reaffirm the principle that an injury to one is an injury to all. Attacks on our members who are immigrants and refugees, who are the other, and who are members of minority faiths cannot be tolerated. Lastly, let's be sure to look inwards at ourselves, into our own unions, because diversity is a fundamental value of the labor movement and a source of our strength. We must expand and protect opportunities for inclusion among the roles of union leadership at every level. I want to conclude today by thanking you once again and celebrating the work you do every day. I celebrate your work and vision. I celebrate you for your courage in the face of attacks by those who would tear down our profession. I celebrate you for being a strong voice in our international trade union movement. I celebrate you for your fight for a better life, because your fight is driven by your love of your learners, your communities, and your country. In the words of the great writer Frantz Fanon, what matters most is not to know the world, but to change it. Thank you. Mandla, thank you.